blacks in technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Welcome everyone to the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast, a show where we talk to Black people who are engineers, innovators, educators, inventors, changemakers, and entrepreneurs doing amazing things in the world of technology. The Bit Tech Talk podcast is where they show how they are stomping the divide by sharing their stories, experiences, ideas, knowledge, and perspective on tech with the Bit community. On this episode of the Bit Tech Talk podcast, our guest is Neil Thompson. Neil is the founder of Teach the Geek, an online platform for STEM professionals. He is also the author of the children's book, Ask Uncle Neil, Why Is My Hair Curly? A story in which Neil uses science to teach his nephew about the texture of his hair. His offering, Teach the Geek to Speak Society, is a membership organization that offers ongoing support for public speaking to those in the STEM fields. Drawing on his years as an engineer in the medical device industry, Neil is an advocate for STEM for adults and children alike. And now our host of the Bit Tech Talk podcast, Greg Greenlee.
Hey, Neil, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
You're welcome. Excellent. So I always like to get started with our common question. Tell us a little bit about yourself, going to where you're from, your education. Give us the skinny on you.
Sure. Well, I live in Southern California, just outside of San Diego. I'm originally from Canada, a city called Brampton. It's a suburb of Toronto. Yeah, that's where I grew up. I've been in the U.S. close to 20 years now, though. So it's getting close to the point where I've lived here longer than I lived there. But I got degrees in materials engineering and biomedical engineering, and I worked as a product development engineer in the medical device industry for a number of years, both here in Southern California. Then before that, I was in Massachusetts. So, my journey into STEM really started there. And I actually got into STEM, into engineering, because my father said I should go into it. It wasn't even something that I was really keen on doing. When I finished high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Both my parents went to university, so I figured I had to go too. Well, I didn't figure that. They said I had to go. But my father said, do engineering, and I had no other idea of what to do. So I said, okay. And that's how I went into it. And, for the longest while, I used to lie about the reason I went into engineering, because I thought it was kind of a lame reason. Because typically when you hear people tell their engineering story, it's more interesting. Perhaps they played with Legos when they were a kid, or maybe they were in robotics club when they were in high school. I never played with Legos, really, and I wasn't in robotics club. It was really my father saying, do engineering. I think it was because it's a pretty stable career. It's well paid, and it's not going anywhere. So I followed his advice, and luckily it worked out.
Shout out to Pops then for having that hindsight, right?
Yeah, we'll say that, yes.
So you're from Canada. Are you a Toronto fan? Toronto, like Raptors?
Oh, most certainly. I remember when we got the team in '95. Our first pick was Damon Stoudemire, Mighty Mouse. And
I remember Damon.
Yeah, it all started there. We got Vince Carter in '98, or we got Tracy McGrady in '97. So those were the three big. Chris Bosh we got in 2003. So those were our I guess, four big stars that we ever had. DeMar DeRozan, you can count him too. He came a little later. But yeah, when they won the championship, that was big for not just the city, but the whole country.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. Now that you mentioned that, I didn't. Those guys end up being associated with different teams because they went to different teams later on in their career. But you all had some legends pass through there, some definite Hall of Famers come through Toronto and start their careers there. So that's pretty dope.
Yeah, and they all left because of the cold and the high taxes.
Really? How cold does it get up in Toronto? I never.
You ever been so cold that you're hot? Like your skin is burning. That's what it's like. I remember back when I was at university, I didn't have a car, so I had to take the bus and subway to school every day. I lived maybe about 30, 45 minutes away. So that's how long it took me to get there. And I'd be waiting in the bus shelter during the winter for the bus to come. and the wind
Right.
would just be whipping through that thing. It might as well have not been a bus shelter. I might as well have just been standing outside. It was horrible. I don't miss it. That's why I live in Southern California. I wouldn't live in other parts of this country that have snow and cold.
Right, right. Smart man, smart man. So, what university did you attend? Is there just like one main university there, or what's that like?
My God, man, Canada has more than one university. Ain't
Well,
that small? I mean, it's not as big as the U.S., but there's certainly more than one. I mean, I went to the
right.
University of Toronto, and there are 3
Okay,
universities in Toronto, but the University of
gotcha.
Toronto is the biggest one.
So, tell me a little bit about materials engine. Well, first off, you say your dad is really the one that kind of moved you or guided you into tech. Was he kind of an influence because of that, or did you have any professors along the way that kind of influenced you, or what was that dynamic like?
I wish that was the case. Because I went to University of Toronto, as I mentioned, it's the biggest school in Toronto, but it's also
Hmm.
the biggest school in Canada. So
Okay.
it's a big research university. So
Hmm.
essentially I felt like a number. I still remember my number, 981812890.
Right.
That was my student number. I got that number back in the late 90s when I
Interesting.
started going there, and I still remember it to this day. But that's
Wow.
basically what it was like. You're in these big classes, especially that first year with a bunch of other people. It wasn't a whole lot of interaction with the professors. And then
Right.
the second year, third year, fourth year, then the classes get smaller. But I still didn't get the sense that the professors were really all that interested in the students, especially when you go to those larger universities. Those
Hmm.
professors are more concerned with research, and that's really what they're there for. And they bring research dollars, millions of dollars of research money into the universities, and that's what the universities really want them to focus on. I mean, if you want more of a teacher student relationship, you probably should go to a college as opposed to a large research university. So that's something I certainly realized after the fact, but it's not something that I regret though. Having a degree from the University of Toronto has been rather helpful. It's pretty well known internationally.
Right. Right. So, what is material engineering?
Materials engineering essentially is the engineering of materials, I guess. I mean, I guess I should be a bit more specific, but it can go into a number of things. One
Okay.
what I ended up doing with it was medical devices. I took a course in biomaterials my 4th year, and I really enjoyed it, and that's why I ended up getting a master's in biomedical engineering, and that's what led to me
Mhm.
getting into medical devices in as a job.
So tell us a little bit more about that. What does an engineer in a medical device industry actually do?
So I worked at companies that were developing spinal implants and instrumentation. So for instance, if you have a bulging disc, you would go to the doc, or you potentially would have a surgery. The
Hmm.
surgeon would remove the bulging disc and they would replace it with a spinal implant. And it could be made out of metal, ceramic, or even bone. So when people donate their bones or donate their organs to science, say you're an organ donor, you
Hmm.
have that on your driver's license, your
Right.
bones can actually be used to develop implants that will be placed into other people. So I worked on the implants that were created out of human cadaver bone.
So that when you tell me that, that makes me think that not only is there the biology part of it, but there's a real heavy chemistry focus as well. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, you would be, because you want to make sure that the implant's not going to be rejected by the body.
So tell me a little. What's that? I mean, what's the curriculum look like then for a materials engineer?
Well, we did a lot of courses on the various materials. There were courses on polymer engineering. I mentioned the biomaterials course, but a lot of the basic courses that a lot of engineers take, we take too. Like kinetics and
Right.
thermodynamics, and even earlier on differential equations, calculus, all that type of thing. It's interesting when you ask about the curriculum.
Hmm.
I put a post on LinkedIn maybe a week or so ago about coding boot camps. So there's a
Right.
guy here in San Diego where I live, Mike Roberts. He has the San Diego Code School, and he takes non-traditional, I guess, people with non-traditional backgrounds. And he puts them through this boot camp for I think a few months, and then he helps them get placed in various companies here in the San Diego area. And I
Hmm.
thought that that can work for software engineering. Then could it possibly work for the more traditional engineering disciplines? Is it really necessary that you go through a 4-year degree to get an engineering degree to then work as an engineer at these companies. I mean, where did 4 years come from? Why 4 years? And as we all know, school, especially here in the U.S., isn't cheap. So when you're starting these, you finally finish school and you start working, you want to find a job that pays pretty well, since you want to pay down that debt as quickly as possible. But could there be an alternative way where you could do those type of jobs without having to take on that type of debt?
And what were your findings? Did you kind of go into it a little bit more, or was it just a thought that you had?
Oh, it was just a thought that I had. I mean, with the idea being just taking the same, I guess, framework of the coding boot camps and applying it to more traditional engineering disciplines. And could that possibly work?
Right. So in the medical device industry, I know you mentioned, you kind of working with human cadavers and I guess building, I don't want to say building, but creating, uses for uses for using the cadavers. Like what other things are you doing? Because when I think of devices, I'm thinking more, something electronic, for instance.
Yeah, you certainly can do that with other medical devices. I guess maybe spinal implants aren't as high tech as some of the other medical devices. Pacemakers, is one of them, as you mentioned, something with a more of an electrical component. So that certainly falls under medical device too. But it just so happened that the jobs that I had were spinal implants.
Was there like one specific company that you worked for during the in the medical device industry, or was it like a number of different companies and you just kind of had that same role across the companies?
No, so I worked for a number of companies. So before I came out to California, I was working at a startup in the Boston area. I did that for a little under 2 years. I was a research associate, and they were developing a spinal implant. Unfortunately, the company went under maybe a month or so after I left. Well, I guess fortunate for me, since I left before they went under. So I wasn't part of the reduction in force, or whatever the term is. I lose my job because I didn't have the job anymore. I went to another job. So I came out here to California. But yeah, I was doing as a research associate there. And then when I came out to California, I took a job at a larger company, probably a mid-sized company, maybe about 500 people. And that's the first time that I was a product development engineer. And again, working on spinal implants, it's sometimes it can be a bit difficult to move away from whatever you've done, because the company that's taking you on kind of wants you to do what you had been doing, because you have the experience in it, as opposed to you trying something else where perhaps the learning curve would be a bit more steep. So the boss that I had at that first company in California started his own company, and I went to that company working as a product development engineer. And then I did that for a few years, but maybe about 4 or 5 years, something like that. And then I went to another company, which was also another California company, which eventually was acquired. I worked there for maybe about a year, and I was a product development engineer there too. So altogether, there were about 4 companies.
Gotcha. And I would have never known that. I guess spinal implants had such a such a market, for spinal implants. Like, well, if I think of something like that, I think like maybe a couple of companies that specialize in it. It seems so kind of a niche thing. That you wouldn't, for someone that's ignorant about that type of thing like me, like I would never have suspected that there'd be so many companies trying to tackle this problem.
Oh man, you wouldn't tell somebody with back pain. They'd probably be real happy that there are a bunch of companies that are doing it.
Do you have a product or service that you would like to share with the BIT audience? Or maybe you'd like to support the BIT community and do your part in helping us with stomping the divide? Start by sponsoring one of our podcasts. Please email us at contactus@blacksintechnology.net.
So I want to get into a little bit about the product development engineer role. I think that's a very interesting title. I've heard of like project manager. I've heard of product manager. So tell us what a product development engineer actually does.
So essentially, we take ideas that we either develop ourselves or we get them from the market, typically from physicians, people that are, I guess, on the ground dealing with patients. and we develop products to address those needs. That's essentially, I mean, what it is in a nutshell. It requires a team. So it's not just the product development working by him or herself. You have also, a marketing person, which is giving you the information from the streets. You got the manufacturing people that'll tell the product development engineers whether this is, able to be made or not. You also have regulatory affairs, which is really important in medical devices. Since there are certain things that you can and can't do as regulated by the FDA. Of course, there's quality as well to make sure that the products that we create meet a certain standard. And that's about the core group. When I worked at the companies, working as a product development engineer, typically I learned later on that there would be a project manager that would kind of I would oversee everything. Yeah. But at least at the company that I was at, there was no project manager, and that responsibility fell on the product development engineer. And that's where my whole, I guess, role kind of shifted from what I thought it was going to be. I mentioned that when I was working in Massachusetts, I was a research associate. I was just working in the lab, doing testing, writing reports, writing protocols, writing reports. And that was pretty easy work. 9 to 5, do that, go home, come back, do it again. When I started this job as a product development engineer, when I moved to California, I thought I'd be doing very similar things. About a few months into the job, they told me that I was going to be a project lead, and I didn't know what that meant. I found out that this company was too cheap to hire project managers, so the product development engineers are going to have to take on that responsibility, one of which was presenting in front of senior management every month on project progress. And that was my first foray into presenting, doing any kind of public speaking in front of people. And I'm telling you, those first few presentations were rough. Because that was something I certainly wasn't practicing.
You should listen to some of the early Tech Talk podcasts. They were definitely rough around the edges for sure. That's really interesting. It sounds, it sounds like, I work as a senior DevOps engineer, and it sounds like the product development engineer in the medical device industry is really similar to the product development life cycle for software engineering and DevOps as well. So there's a lot of similarities. You kind of have the marketing team, and they're telling you kind of what the consumer needs or wants. They kind of relay that to the product development. In our case, is product development manager and the project manager, and they kind of work together on kind of how this thing on the needs, and they kind of scope it out. And then from there, we have maybe an architect, and they kind of talk to to the parties as well, and they say, oh, okay, well, I think this is kind of the way that we should develop this thing, and they architect the solution, and then it trickles down to the the engineers to kind of to finally like build the thing, right?
Yeah. So another thing about medical devices is it's highly regulated. It's FDA regulated. So there are certain design protocol. There's certain process that we have to go through to develop products, and if not, then our products could be recalled, and you have to pay fines. It's a problem if you run afoul of the FDA. So that's another thing that product development engineers have to be abreast on.
Got you. Interesting. So you stated in your bio that you work as a patent agent as well. Like, tell us a little bit about that, because when I think of, for one, I know just from kind of hearing about people like Einstein, and there's other people in the history that's been like patent clerks. I know that it takes a level of intellect in order to work in with anything with patents, whether you're a lawyer, patent lawyer, or anything like that. You have to have be pretty smart. So for one, is that true? And two, tell us a little bit about what a patent agent does, and kind of some of the duties associated with that.
Sure. Well, the difference between a patent agent and a patent attorney is law school. So attorneys go to law school and they have to pass the bar in a jurisdiction. Right. Patent agents didn't go to law school and obviously don't have to pass the bar, but they both have the ability to draft patent applications and prosecute them at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And I actually became a patent agent not because of my own doing. It seems like I like being told what to do. My father told me to go into engineering, and now my boss at one of the companies I was working at, that same boss who started his own company, he wanted the engineers to go and become patent agents, so he wouldn't have to outsource patent drafting to outside counsel. So it was myself and two other engineers that were supposed to become patent agents, but I'm the only one that actually did it because I thought that it was something that he was telling us we had to do, but I guess I heard him wrong. the other two didn't do it. So I'm the only one that became a patent agent. And wouldn't you know, nice. He still outsourced all the patent drafting to outside counsel?
Of course.
So so I became a patent agent back in 2012, but because he was still outsourcing everything, there wasn't really much patent work for me to do. So a few years after leaving that company back in, I guess I left in 2014, I worked as a freelance patent agent for a while, just taking on whatever work I could get. Right. But back in 2019, I actually just celebrated, I guess, my 2-year anniversary at this firm. The founder actually just called me earlier today to tell me that. I didn't even know. But I work at this virtual firm. It was a firm that was virtual even before COVID. It's called Torrey Pines Law Group, and it's here in the San Diego area. And we work primarily on life science inventions and innovations, since that's really big here in the San Diego area. A lot of biotech, medical devices, pharma companies are here. So those tend to make up the majority of our clients. And I work mostly on the medical device patents. It's been really fun working at the firm. And not only that, but the founder has really given me the opportunity to pitch ideas to even get the word out about the firm. So I'm here on this podcast talking about myself and the things that I do. But when it comes to the firm, we myself and the founder have done podcast interviews on various medical device related podcasts, just talking about IP and the importance of it when it comes to medical devices.
Very nice. So I can expect that check soon, since you mentioned. No, I'm just
kidding. You can expect whatever you want, Greg.
I guess so, huh?
What's up, everyone? We hope that you're enjoying this episode of the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast. Do you or someone you know have a dope story that they want to share with our Bit audience? Blacks in Technology is seeking guests to be on our podcast. We're looking to highlight the journeys and experiences of Black women and men in the tech industry. So if you know of someone, send them our way. Shoot us an email to contact us at blacksintechnology.net, or click on the link in the show notes and fill out our form. We're looking to hear from you.
So let's so kind of tell us a little bit. Let's go a little bit more in depth with, like, what is a patent agent? Like, what are they doing? Are they doing research on someone files for a patent, and so they take a look at it and they research on whether or not this technology has been created before, and like what are if they're infringing on anyone's patent or anything. Tell us a little bit more about that process.
Sure. So let's just say you're an inventor and you have an invention idea and you wanted to keep others from making, using, and selling your invention. Then it may be a good idea to seek or to apply for a patent, get a patent application written. Right. So that's something that a patent agent or a patent attorney can do. Typically, the first step in the process, though, is to do a prior art search. And we use a company to do that, although some patent agents do their own searches. I don't do my own searches. That's really boring work. I'm really happy to outsource that to somebody else. So they'll essentially come back with, the search company will come back with patent applications and issued patents that are similar to what that inventor is trying to have patented. And then the patent agent or patent attorney will look through those documents and analyze them to see, give an opinion as to whether what the inventor is wanting to patent would be dissimilar enough to get a patent on. So once that inventor then makes a decision to move on with the process, he or she has the ability to have a provisional application filed or a non-provisional application. Provisional application is good for a year, after which you have to file a non-provisional application. The reason some file the provisional application is if they have improvements to their invention they could file subsequent provisional applications, and provisional applications are cheaper to file than non-provisional applications. Typically, when you file the non-provisional application, your idea is pretty well baked, and that's what the invention is going to be. So then you file the non-provisional application.
Gotcha.
Then once you file that, then essentially you're waiting for the patent examiner to examine your application, and that examiner will either accept it and it issues as a patent, or they'll reject it. Most applications are rejected. I think about 70% of applications are rejected initially, but that's okay. Once you get that rejection, you then have the opportunity to respond to the rejection to convince the patent examiner to essentially change his or her mind and have the patent application issue as a patent. Another thing I want to mention is patents aren't cheap, and it's going to cost you a few $1,000s at least to get a patent issued, and it usually takes some time. It could take up to 3-4 years to get a patent issued. Yeah. And another thing about patents that people should know is that they're only good in the country in which you filed them. There's no such thing as an international patent. So if you file for a patent in the U.S., it's only good in the U.S. It's not good in other places. You would have to file applications in those other places to get protection in those places.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense. If you invent it in the U.S., someone else can invent the same thing, and there's different business laws and things like that, and in different countries. So I can see why you would need to. Although that, some people might hear that and think it's a money making scheme for that to happen. But for you to have to do that, but I'm pretty sure there's definite reasons why that is. But it sounds like a real tedious and involved process as well to kind of do all the analysis on the patents themselves, and I'm guessing that's why it takes it could take up to 3 or 4 years because of that research and analysis. Am I right?
Well, it really has to do with the backlog of the patent office. I mean, they get a whole lot of applications, and there's only so many examiners that have a certain amount of time to go through the application. So that's really what the time lag is.
Is there? So I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking there has to be. Is there layers to this? So, for instance, does a patent come to you? You kind of do your analysis and your research, and then do you hand it off to someone else who then scrutinizes your work, and then they hand it out? Because it sounds like you can't possibly find out everything on a first pass.
Well, that's certainly something that we communicate to the client. So when I mentioned the prior art search, the search company will come back with applications and patents. But then when the patent examiner does his or her own search, they could come up with other applications and patents that the prior art search company didn't come up with, and then reject the application based on their search. So that's something that we definitely communicate to the inventor right off the bat. Just because we have this search report, I mean, it's great because, so we kind of know what the landscape is, but we can't possibly find everything.
Yeah. Gotcha. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about Teach the Geek. Tell us a little bit about it. Give us kind of like the impetus of why you started this.
Sure. So the job that I came out here to California to do is, I think I mentioned earlier, I thought I was just going to be a product development engineer, but I ended up being a project lead. So every month I had to get up in front of senior management and talk about project progress. And those first few presentations were absolutely horrible. I did not know that it was possible to sweat that profusely out of one's body. I mean, the dry cleaning bills were ridiculous. It was, and I noticed that the other engineers weren't all that much better at presenting than I was. And looking back on it now, I think the issue that a lot of us have is we have all this technical expertise, but we're not the best at presenting it in front of people that don't necessarily have that technical expertise. So we oftentimes get these questions that we thought we had answered during our presentation, but because we didn't put it in such a way that the audience could understand, now we're getting these questions. We essentially wasted time putting the presentation together because it didn't meet the needs of the audience. The audience is wasting its time because we didn't do a good enough job at presenting the data or presenting our work. It's just a waste of time altogether. And so when I figured this out, I actually figured this out when my project got canceled. The project that I came out to the company to do was canceled. I thought I was going to be out of a job. Luckily, they just found other things from other projects to move me to do. But that was really the wake up call that I needed to know that I need to get better at communicating, especially in front of non-technical people.
Right. Okay.
So essentially, that's what Teach the Geek is. It's my way of I guess helping people like me, people that work in the STEM fields, engineers, scientists types, who see the benefit of getting better at public speaking and want to do something about it. So it initially started off with a course called Teach the Geek to Speak. But I realized earlier this year that a one-off course wasn't enough, and I wanted to provide something that was more ongoing. So I launched the Teach the Geek to Speak Society. So essentially, with the course, you still get the course, but in addition to the course, you also get a community of like-minded people who want to get better at their public speaking. So there's a private Facebook group, and then there's monthly calls too. Just being able to be with other people who see the benefit of getting better, I think it's more helpful than just a course that you do and that's it.
Right. And I'm guessing because it's called Teach the Geek, you're kind of specializing in in teaching like more engineers, because there's definitely other programs out there like I think it's called Toastmasters or something like that help people with public speaking, and I know there's other ones, but yours, you are targeting engineers, right?
Yeah, so I'm targeting the group that I belong to, because that just made more sense for me to do. Because I belong to the group, I know what they go through, so I know the ways to address it. And yes, Toastmasters is an excellent forum for practicing public speaking. For those of you of the listeners that don't know, it's an international organization whose main goal is to help people with their public speaking. And I was actually a member of Toastmasters for a number of years. Wherever I was living, I joined a Toastmasters group, and it was great to be able to practice, giving speeches in front of people. And the issue I suppose I had with Toastmasters is it wasn't really specific to any sort of industry or any type of person. It was just for anybody who wanted to get better at public speaking, not necessarily the group that I'm targeting, which is people that work in STEM.
Gotcha. So tell us a little bit about what membership looks like, what services you offer.
So you have the course, and the course I made sure was something that people would actually finish. So there's not a whole lot of fluff involved in the course. I was actually just talking about it with somebody maybe just a few days ago, and she asked me how long it would take to take the course from start to finish. I said they could listen to everything from start to finish in about 90 minutes, and she was like, "Wow, that's not very long." And I said, "Yeah, that's on purpose, because a lot of courses out there people don't finish. I know for myself." Yeah, I've bought courses that I've never finished. I'm not even sure I got halfway through. You might start off all gung ho about it, like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. You pay your money and you're all happy about it, but then you start to do it, and you start doing the videos, and one video, then the next video, and the next one. It's just like, yeah, I'm kind of over this. Yeah. And then you just never finish it, and then you don't get the results that you want because you didn't finish. So I wanted to make sure that the course was short enough that people would actually finish, but that it was packed with enough information that they could actually use. And when I told her that, the person I was talking to about it, she said, yeah, that's actually really good, because she was mentioning that she was doing another course. I think it was a 30-day challenge. I think she said it was. Okay. And it required quite a lot more of a time commitment that she had anticipated. She wasn't able to make all of the meetings, and now, you spend this money and you're not necessarily getting everything that you thought, all the outcomes that you thought you'd get out of it, because you're not able to finish it. Right. I didn't want that to be an issue for people doing Teach the Geek to Speak.
Gotcha. And give us like a success story from Teach the Geek, somebody who kind of reached back and said, hey, I took your course, and this is kind of what came from me taking your course. What
someone, and not just someone, but more than one person, likes about the course is the fact that it presents what I'm talking about as a process. When I first put the course together, it was just a bunch of videos that I did at my kitchen table. Bad lighting. I didn't really, I didn't really script it at all. It was just more of a stream of consciousness type of thing. Yeah. Luckily, I showed it to a friend, and they said, you can't put this out. You can't sell this. What would be best is if you put it in the form of a process. And when they said that, I felt kind of dumb because I worked as an engineer, as a product development engineer, and we have to follow a process, especially working in medical devices. It's FDA regulated. So why didn't I think to make my course a process too? So what I ended up doing is making the course essentially a 6-step process to practice and deliver any speech you have to give. And that's what people really like about it. It's something that's you do over and over again. It's repeatable. You don't have to recreate the wheel every time you have to give a presentation. You just follow the process.
Nice. And now that I'm thinking about, I know that it you kind of target public speakers, but does that also kind of include anything that has to do with presentations? Because I've seen some, and I'm saying like PowerPoint presentations, for instance, like someone that's giving, because I've given talks at some tech conferences, and I think when I first started, my presentations, the actual PowerPoints themselves were just like horrible. There were too much information, too many bullet points, that type of thing. Do you go over that type of stuff, or is it just strictly just public speaking itself?
Oh no, Greg, I absolutely do go over PowerPoints in the course. You're absolutely right. You go to a lot of these tech conferences and the presenters are like you. They'll put up a bunch of slides with a whole lot of information on them. People oftentimes end up just reading the slides and not listening to what you have to say. And ultimately it becomes, public reading, not public speaking. And that's not what you're there for. So yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a proper, or what I would consider proper slide design when it comes to giving presentations. Nice. Pictures instead of text is best.
Yeah, I've learned that over the years. I've learned that. That's nice. I'll definitely have to check out the course myself. I could always use improvement. So tell us, a little bit about your STEM advocacy work. What's that like for you? What do you consider, STEM advocacy, and how do you, how do you advocate for STEM?
My STEM advocacy stems, I didn't mean to do that. It originates from my children's book. I wrote a children's book called Ask Uncle Neil, Why Is My Hair Curly? It's about my nephew asking me why his hair is the way it is, and I use science to answer the question. I wrote the book to motivate or to encourage more Black children to consider careers in STEM. And I make sure that I say that I use those words particularly, saying for them to consider careers in STEM. I don't want for them to just go into STEM because, Blacks are underrepresented in STEM. I don't think it's a good enough reason. You want to go into STEM because it's something that you're interested in and you're willing to do the work to work in that field. Yeah. It's just for a lot of us, we're just not exposed to it to then even have the interest in it. And so I wrote the book for children grades 2 to 3 to kind of stimulate that in their heads, so that even if they have naysayers as they get older who say that STEM isn't for them, that they can ignore them because they read this book when they were 7, 8 years old that says they can do whatever they want.
I love that, and it speaks to the core of the Blacks in Technology community and the idea that kind of started this whole thing. It wasn't because I talked to a lot of different community members from BIT, and we all have these different backgrounds and different paths to technology, right? So, I talked to people, and some of them they were into music before, and some of them were into fashion, and some of them did this thing and some of them did that thing. And so for me, I always like to present technology not as something, like you mentioned, that you need to go into just because we're underrepresented. Here's an option for you to take a look at if you want to. I want to present the information to you and get you exposed to it so that you can make a better decision or a more educated decision on whether or not STEM is even, technology in our case, it is for you. And if you choose to, let's just say, if you choose to do music, that's okay, because
just know that if you also want to do technology, you can do them both. There's options for you. So I like what you said there about, it's not about pushing people to be in specific, to be in technology just because.
I fully agree with what you just said, Greg. I think it's highly inappropriate to tell people what to do. You just offer different options, and then, as you said, they can make a more informed decision as to what they want to do.
The BIT Foundation has established featured partnerships and programs with companies such as Amazon, AT&T, CompTIA, Techstars, and more to provide our members with the resources we want and need to thrive and succeed in this tech ecosystem. To learn more, visit foundation.blacksintechnology.net. Join now, and remember, membership is free.
So where can people find your book, Ask Uncle Neil?
They can go to askuncleneil.com.
Okay. Excellent. And so what's next for you? Tell us, how can, what do you have going on? What's next for Teach the Geek?
Sure. Well, when it comes to Ask Uncle Neil, I plan on writing more books. I want to make it a series where it's my nephew asking me a question and I use science to answer it. I don't really know what the questions are right now, but it certainly will be, different questions. And then when it comes to Teach the Geek, it's developing more content for it. So right now, the focus is on public speaking, but as I'm sure you can attest to, there are a number of issues that people in the STEM fields face when it comes to, I guess, more non-technical type of skills. Yeah. So in addition to public speaking, there might be networking, there might be interviewing, other things that perhaps we're not the best, negotiating, other things that perhaps we're not the best at, but could really help us out in becoming, just better engineers, just better employees, just better people.
I love that idea. And so before we get out of here, how can people reach you? Are you on Twitter? How can people get in contact with you if they want to?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. So for Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, if you look for Teach the Geek, you'll find me. And if you look for Neil Thompson on LinkedIn, you'll find me likely. There's going to be a number of Neil Thompsons, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only black one. So once you see that guy, that'll likely be me.
That's you.
Yeah, that's me. And then I also have a YouTube channel where I interview other engineers and scientist types too, about public speaking. Really interesting to learn not just necessarily their tips on getting better at public speaking, but their journeys in what they've done in their careers. I mean, you could start off in one place and then end up somewhere completely different. So if you want to learn about that, you can go to youtube.teachthegeek.com. And then also, if you want to learn more about the membership, you can go to teachthegeek.com.
Very, very nice. Well, Neil, I definitely want to say it's been a pleasure having you on the show, learning about Teach the Geek, learning about your work as an engineer, and I definitely wish you the best of luck in everything that you do in the future.
Great. Thanks again for having me, Greg.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology.